All right. Greetings, magnificent souls, to the Attract Health, Build Wealth podcast, where we have open and honest discussions about ourselves. This is a place where we break down, break away, and break through codependency, allowing ourselves to attract health, build wealth, and live a peaceful life. We are tired of being sick and tired. We are tired, but we are not giving up. We know that there is something magnificent inside of us. And because we are fighting daily, hourly, and by the minute, fighting ourselves, our kids, our spouses, we have to do things differently. We have to break the cycle. We don't have a million chances. We have to be happy now. We have to find a way. So how do we do that? How is that possible? If you look around at what society is telling you, they tell you that what we're doing is impossible, yet it's happening every single day. And it's happening through the practice and the love that we call awakening the magnificent soul. We are all magnificent souls, and these are our stories of healing. Today, in episode 37, part 3 of a 10-part series all focused on control. Today, I wanted to discuss abuse in a broad sense right now. And now that I'm kind of thinking about it, I may do another series on the different types of abuse. But today, I wanted to cover abuse and its relationship to control. But before we get into the discussion, don't forget to let me know your thoughts about this episode, any feedback you have, or anything you'd like me to cover on future podcasts at epiphanyvault.com. Remember, you can share anonymously. It is a safe place, and I would welcome the discussion. A big thanks out there to Matthew, who wrote into the Epiphany Vault. He did give me permission to share his entry with you all, so here I go. He says, I'm very codependent. I need my girlfriend's approval for everything I do. If I don't hear from her, I feel awful. If I'm not told I'm loved, I start to freak out. I go into hysterical fits and just keep spam texting and spam calling. I know it's toxic, and I just finished listening to the first podcast. I'm really hoping I'm able to calm down more and to get over my codependency so that I can let her be who she is while she still loves me. Like I said, I just started this podcast, so if there is an episode that I should really listen to for this problem, please let me know. Matthew, thank you so much again for sharing with me. And I must commend you for being so self-aware at this point. I can only imagine that you must feel very out of balance when this is happening. And really, I think that the first step is recognizing that you feel this way and that your actions towards your girlfriend are not making you feel great. And you feel maybe a little bit unhealthy in that. So I think that you've made a great start. I don't have really a particular episode that I think you should listen to, and because I'm not a trained expert and I'm only kind of speaking from my experience, I can tell you what I did after taking this first step. After I realized that I just didn't want to be this unhappy anymore, I completely immersed myself in books, in podcasts, and videos about codependency. And it kind of became an obsession, still is really, for a while. And sooner or later, things began to click for me. Epiphanies and aha moments kind of came at me from all sides. So from what you said, that's what I would recommend for you, as that's really what helped me. I would also keep in mind that if your experience is the same or similar to mine, there probably will not be a fix-all medicine or action that you can take to rid yourself of codependency. And again, I'm speaking from experience. So just a reminder to be patient and kind with yourself. I personally have been doing this work for about 2 years now. And although I'm much, 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 much healthier, codependency pops up still when I least expect it. And all I can do and all we can do is the very best that we can. And I think you're doing a great job so far. So love to you, Matthew, magnificent soul. And thanks again for listening to the podcast. So now on to today's topic. For the past few episodes, we've been talking about control and different aspects of control that manifest through codependent relationships. I thought now would be a good time to talk about abuse. And abuse in general, kind of today, as I think I'll do probably another series about the different kinds of abuse at a different point in time. But I really thought that this would be a great topic to cover right now, because sometimes abuse can be very overt, but at other times it may not be as easy to point out and identify. And again, today, as I have been doing, I did want to touch on the different personality types and then maybe explore why or how this happens and what we can do about it if we find ourselves in abusive situations. Something that I really never realized until recently is that abuse can come in many different forms. I have very extensive experience with abuse, but at this point, I think I'm going to cover them probably in detail in my new book that I'm writing, but this is really kind of a personal and a tough subject for me. And up until recent reflection, I was kind of confident that I had not endured any abuse. But as I read and research more and pull out memories from the depth of my conscious, I realize that there are some specific things that I can point to when it comes to abuse. Again, I think I'll pass on the details right now, but I'm exploring them while I'm writing my book. I think most people are aware of physical, verbal, and sexual abuse. But did you also know that there's mental abuse, there's spiritual abuse, and financial abuse? And abuse in its most base form is a means by which people degrade you, control you, punish you, or manipulate you. And I don't think it's hard to put two and two together, really, as to what abuse has to do with control from a dominant personality perspective. So we'll start there. As with most of the codependency patterns we explore, abuse is similar. The cycle from one generation to the next tends to repeat itself with abuse. I think abuse is a learned behavior that tends to manifest itself in these familial patterns. So with that, both the dominant and the submissive personality types are kind of players, so to speak, in the codependency game. And at first glance, I think the dominant abuser uses abuse to control and manipulate, like we said before. And I think it's fear and shame manifesting itself through those actions. What are they fearful or shameful of? I think that it's hard to present as I'm sitting here, from an objective perspective behind the screen, but likely, or behind the mic, but likely something in their former childhood experience puts them at the utmost defensive. From my experience, dominant personalities seem very confident on the outside, but inside are very insecure. Thus, their abusive actions towards others is a way of protecting themselves surrounding these insecurities. And I think that's where the control aspect comes into play for people like this. They try really hard to control their environment through abuse. And I just want to stop here and say that I don't want to dismiss the severity of different abuses or abusive behaviors by simplifying the whys and the hows. And again, I'm coming at you from my experience and my study and my ruminations about my life. And for anyone listening that are in critical situations right now where they're in imminent danger or your children are in imminent danger, please get help from outside organizations. This is what they're there for, and I'll link to them in the show notes, but it's really up to you to pick up the phone and to take action and to break everyone, ourselves, from these chains. So that's really what I want to do here. It's to motivate you and assure you that you can do it and that you're worth it. I've tried to talk to the dominant other in my relationships, and it almost always ends up in a fight or disagreement. And as much as I wanted the other person to be understanding and respectful, it's just not possible. It seems kind of counterintuitive when you think about it, but what if someone feels so out of control within themselves? Could they perhaps turn to controlling someone else to grasp on to any little bit of control that they can, even though it's unhealthy, even though they're hurting their family, even though they can't own up to it themselves? Like, are they so emotionally distraught and unhappy with different aspects of their lives and have such an unlove for themselves that they have to fight, quote unquote, fight for what they love? So through fear and through shame, the submissive personality tends to be like putty in the hands of a dominant personality. Likely inside, the dominant one will not recognize their behavior as abuse, though. From my experience, it's almost impossible, like I said, to talk sense into someone like this. So that is my warning label. And the need for control is so strong that empathy is almost an impossible quality trait. Even though you may try to be reasonable or have a productive conversation, you as a submissive may likely be gaslighted, called crazy, or your feelings just completely ignored. And remember how we talk about codependency as a state of extremes, as a complete disconnect from oneself. It seems to be that abuse succeeds when you lose control of yourself and control is transferred to the abuser. Does that make sense? So when you don't have the skills, the innate ability, or the mental capacity to say, wait, hold up, this is not right for me. Essentially, when boundaries are questionable or at times non-existent. And for me, I lost the ability to connect to feelings of what was right for me because I was so caught up in feeling horrible about my situation, feeling horrible about how unhappy I was, or about how I was going to deal with the abuse after it happened, which is usually nothing, honestly, and it just made me feel even worse and just degraded myself like it was really my fault. So let's get into the submissive side of the coin. And can I tell you, in all honesty, that I lost friends throughout my life because I was too wrapped up in my codependency. If you're like me, you know how it feels. It's alienating and you feel alone, which, mind you, it's the perfect scenario for this type of codependent relationship to blossom. Trust me, I know. For people who don't understand codependency, they see abuse happening and they don't understand why the abuse continue to stay in such harmful relationships and situations. First, let me say that you're not alone. I say this many times, but it's true. You may feel that way and you may feel desperate, but you are not alone. Secondly, I want to urge you to try your very best and to resist the urge to be hard on yourself because you can't seem to leave or change your situation. I will go over all the details and how it went down for me in my book that I'm writing, but let me just say that there were times I felt so down and out of touch with myself for not changing things, for not having the strength just to leave and cut him out of my life. And I'm not saying that's what you should do. I'm not saying that I know but what I am saying, is that I know how it feels to be confused. And it took me a while to understand why I continued in this pattern. I think on the surface, I was lonely, but deep down, I was unloved. I was unloved by myself. And because I did not love myself, I took any type of attention from him as love. It doesn't make much sense. It doesn't make much sense now, but I would make excuses for his actions. Have you ever heard someone say, or have you said this to yourself, he does it because he loves me? And that's, and looking back, that's what I felt unconsciously, I guess. And deep down, I didn't feel worthy of any love because I didn't love myself. So I took what I could get. I was floating, boundaryless, in a sea of unlove just to feel loved. And it seems like it makes no sense whatsoever, but that's really what it was. Does that make any sense at all? And there's a lot of my past, honestly, that I'm embarrassed about now because of my choice to stay in that type of relationship. I now know that it was not my fault. I still have work to do to be present and to be kind to myself. But honestly, if you have gotten this far in listening to me today, I commend you. Much love out there. And some things I do want to close with. That if you find yourself in an abusive situation, please don't discount your feelings or severity of your situation. If you find yourself having to make excuses for you or the other person in your relationship, it may be a good time for you to do some exploring about yourself and about why you are where you are. I can't say it enough, but please do all of this with kindness and love and compassion. You're worth it. We're all worth it. Until next time, living and loving.